When people ask me where my story truly began, I never know whether to say it started in the cramped apartment where I was born, or on the night I first realized love can both heal and destroy. My name is Daniel, and if you're listening to me now, it's because fate wanted you to hear how poverty and betrayal shaped the man I became. I grew up in a world where dreams felt heavier than hunger, because at least hunger ended after a meal, dreams just kept gnawing. My father worked in a suffocating metal workshop, his hands blistered and blackened by fire, while my mother sat cross-legged on the floor, mending clothes until her back ached. We were poor, yes, but we carried our dignity like armor. I believe that was enough. Then there was Elena. She wasn't just my neighbor or childhood friend, she was the heartbeat inside the silence of my days. We ran barefoot through narrow streets, traded secret smiles during evening prayers, and promised one another, without words, that life would not keep us small. When I finally asked her to marry me, she laughed through her tears, and in that moment, I felt richer than any man alive. Marriage, however, has a way of turning promises into tests. We began our life together with nothing but a thin mattress and an even thinner wallet, yet we carried an abundance of hope. At night, when the electricity failed, we would sit in the candlelight and whisper dreams into the darkness, a modest house, a steady income, children who would never have to beg for books or food. Elena's laughter, soft and genuine, always reassured me that no hardship could break us. But hardship has sharp edges. Every unpaid bill scraped against our bond. Every empty pocket pressed like a bruise between us. I took long shifts at a printing press, inhaling ink and dust while she stretched a single meal into two. For a while, we wore our sacrifices like medals, proud of enduring together. Yet something shifted, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Elena grew quieter, her smiles briefer. She began dressing with a care that startled me, as if she were preparing for an audience beyond our tiny room. At first, I told myself it was nothing. She deserved to feel beautiful. But then came the absences, the hurried explanations, the silences that weighed more than words. It was during one of those silences that the first crack split open between us. I asked her where she had been, my voice cautious, and she replied too quickly, too sharply, with my cousin. The answer might have satisfied another man, but in her eyes I saw a flicker, something unspoken, something fragile, something I wasn't meant to see. That night, as I lay awake beside her, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, a cold thought lodged itself in my mind. What if the woman who once made me feel whole was already slipping away into someone else's world? I didn't know it then, but that suspicion was the spark that would set fire to everything we built. The days that followed felt like walking on a fragile sheet of glass. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Elena still cooked our meals, still folded my shirts with quiet care, still shared the same bed at night. Yet beneath those familiar gestures, something unspoken pulsed between us, like a shadow stretching longer with each passing day. I began noticing the small things. Her phone, once left casually on the table, now rarely left her hand. When I entered a room, she angled the screen away, her smile rehearsed. She started leaving earlier in the evenings, claiming errands or visits to relatives, but her explanations grew shorter, as if words themselves had become a burden. I wanted to believe her. I told myself that love demanded trust, that doubt was poison. But late at night, as she slept beside me, I would stare at the ceiling and replay every detail, the flicker in her eyes, the sharpness in her tone, the careful way she avoided meeting my gaze. It felt as though I was grasping sand with bare hands, and no matter how tightly I tried to hold on, she was slipping through my fingers. One evening, I returned home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, the dinner cold on the table, her chair empty. Hours later, when she walked through the door, her cheeks flushed as if from laughter I hadn't shared, I asked her where she had been. She didn't hesitate. With my cousin, she said again. But this time, her voice carried an edge, almost daring me to question her further. That night, I sat alone by the window, watching the streetlights flicker. A storm churned inside me, anger, fear, and a kind of sorrow I didn't yet have words for. I wanted to demand the truth, but what if the truth shattered me? What if knowing meant losing her entirely? Instead, I buried myself deeper into work. The printing press became both my refuge and my prison. The machines clattered endlessly, drowning out the thoughts I couldn't silence. At home, Elena moved around me like a stranger, polite but distant, as though the intimacy we once shared had been packed away with old memories. Still, I clung to hope. Perhaps it was pride, or perhaps it was love, but I convinced myself that if I could earn more, if I could finally lift us out of poverty, she would return to me. I told myself her restlessness was only impatience, her silence only frustration with the life we could not yet afford. But deep in my chest, I knew. Something had shifted between us, something irreversible. And though I wasn't ready to admit it, the foundation of our marriage, the trust one thought unbreakable, was already beginning to crack. The question that haunted me wasn't whether Elena was hiding something. It was whether I had the strength to face it when the truth finally came crashing down. It didn't take long before suspicion turned into something heavier, evidence that I could no longer explain away. One evening, as I reached for Elena's scarf from her handbag, a small folded note slipped onto the floor. My heart stumbled as I opened it. The words were brief, almost careless, but they burned like fire. Until next time. No name, no signature, just 3 words that split my chest open. When she walked in moments later, humming softly, I hid the note in my pocket. My voice trembled when I asked how her cousin was doing. She looked at me, eyes steady, and answered with practiced ease, "She's fine." That calmness was worse than any confession, it felt like I was living with a stranger skilled in disguise. From that night, the world around me seemed sharper, harsher. Every ringtone made me flinch, every whisper of her phone screen pulled my eyes. I began following the patterns of her absence, an hour here, 2 hours there, always explained with the same casual shrug. The more I searched for answers, the more I realized I was no longer her safe place. Her laughter, once spontaneous and free, now belonged somewhere else, someone else. But confronting her felt like walking into a fire I wasn't ready to face. Instead, I drowned myself in work, taking extra shifts, learning new skills, anything to distract myself from the ache gnawing inside. I told myself I was building a future for us, but deep down, I knew I was running from the present. Still, there were moments when I almost convinced myself nothing had changed. The way she poured tea in the mornings, the way her hair brushed against my arm as she moved around the kitchen, it was enough to make me doubt my own instincts. But then I'd catch that flicker again in her eyes, the faraway look of someone already halfway out the door. The breaking point came one Friday evening. I returned home earlier than she expected, only to find her dressed in clothes far too elegant for a casual family visit. Perfume lingered in the air, a fragrance I couldn't afford and hadn't given her. I asked, softly at first, then more firmly, "Where are you going, Elena?" She froze, her hand tightening on the strap of her purse. For a moment, I thought she might tell me the truth. But then her lips curved into a smile too polished, too deliberate. "I told you already. My cousin." This time, the words rang hollow. The silence that followed was louder than any fight. I watched her walk out the door, her heels clicking against the pavement, and for the first time, I didn't chase after her. Because in that silence, I knew, the woman I loved was slipping into another world, and sooner or later, that world would collide with mine. The night it all came crashing down is etched into me like a scar. I followed Elena that evening, my footsteps heavy with dread, each turn of her rickshaw dragging me closer to a truth I already feared. She stepped into a restaurant I could never afford, her dress shimmering under the glow of chandeliers. Through the glass, I saw him, tall, confident, with a smile that belonged to another world. He leaned across the table, touched her hand, and she laughed. It was the same laughter that once belonged to me. I stood frozen, watching the life I had built unravel in front of strangers' eyes. My chest burned, my fists clenched, but I didn't storm in. I couldn't. Instead, I turned away, the weight of betrayal pressing me into the pavement. Later that night, I confronted her. My voice was barely more than a whisper, "Elena, I know." She didn't deny it. Her silence was the loudest confession. Finally, with unsettling calm, she said, "Daniel, I can't live on promises anymore. He gives me the life you never could." The words cut deeper than any knife. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, only to realize love was not enough to bind us. She had already chosen. The days that followed were a blur of pain and awakening. Grief sat heavy on my shoulders, but beneath it, something else stirred, a fire I hadn't felt before. If money was the measure of worth in her eyes, then I would rise, not to win her back, but to prove I was never as small as she believed. I threw myself into work like a man possessed. Failures came first, sharp and humiliating, but I refused to stop. Slowly, my efforts grew into businesses, businesses into opportunities, and opportunities into wealth. Years passed, and the boy who once lived on borrowed hope became a man others envied. And then, one day, I saw her again. Time had dimmed her glow. The man she left me for was gone, replaced by whispers of abandonment. She stood before me, eyes filled with regret. "You've changed, Daniel," she murmured. I smiled, not with bitterness but with peace. She was no longer my wound, only a memory. Because the truth was simple, her betrayal had broken me, but it had also rebuilt me. From poor to rich, from broken to whole, sometimes the deepest scars carve the strongest foundations. Sparkles, if you enjoyed this story and want to see more powerful, emotional journeys like this one, don't forget to subscribe to our channel.